If you want to feel the wind blowing through your hair and see the great city of Nashville at the same time, check out Nashville Scooter Tours. Trekking through the downtown streets to Music Row with Nashville Scooter Tours is safe, eco-friendly, and a whole lot of fun. They use Xenon electric scooters that go 55 miles on a single charge. Find out more by calling 615-290-5563 or book your reservation today at NashvilleScooterTours.com. Jeff Meeks and Chris Austin invite you to watch your favorite sports event at the Batter's Box at 43 Hermitage Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. The Batter's Box offers shuttle service to all Titans home games. It's a great place for friends to gather for the game and after the game. So check out the Batter's Box Bar and Grill, and thanks again for sponsoring the show. Christmas is over and it's time to get back to work. Unless you're in Congress, the question becomes, will the Neros fiddle while Rome burns? If they do, will increased taxes and less spending help our economy? Don't know. And of course, guns. It's on everybody's mind, and we're going to be talking about it too. Stay tuned. Coming up next, Political Soup. From the family grocery hauler to fire-breathing racing engines, the one name you need to know is USA Motor and Machine, located at 51 Cleveland Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. Give them a call at 615-726-3725 or at usamotorandmachine.com. If you're looking to learn guitar, check out Dave Isaac's Guitar Studio on Music Row. Whether you are a beginner or hobbyist, to professional songwriter or artist, Dave offers a unique and powerful method of instruction that teaches not just the instrument, but the whole musician. Find out more at NashvilleGuitarGuru.com. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Political Soup. I'm Joe Wiiliams, and we have special guests today. You notice that is plural. Of course, Crom Carmichael, who joined us the last time, and to that we add, as a balance to this table, the current chairman of the Tennessee Democratic Party, Mr. Chip Forrester. Gentlemen, welcome in. This is going to be fun.
I'm on the left and he's on the right.
Yeah, there you go.
Kind
of
strange how that came out. A couple of ground rules here. For the most part,
no fisticuffs.
I'm in the middle for a reason. That's right. Next week, I may wear my striped official's uniform.
Have a whistle.
Outside of that, gentlemen, we're here to have good discussion. I started to say positive. I think I'll just call it good discussion on the issues of the day. And I guess the one that's on everybody's mind right now as we approach the end of the year, the fiscal cliff that we've been looking for, I guess, since the great debacle over raising the debt level. And in the midst of this, we've got a president in Hawaii. We got a Congress out on vacation. You know, I don't know about y'all, but in the businesses that I've been in, if we were facing something like this, we stayed and worked, no matter what day it was. Gentlemen?
Well, the Senate's coming back tonight. I mean, they'll be back this afternoon, so give them some credit. They are coming back after a Christmas holiday. Probably haven't got all their presents unwrapped, and but they'll be back on duty.
Fair enough.
And hopefully the Senate will pass a budget, which they haven't done in about 3 years. But the we're gonna go over the cliff. There's nobody says that anything's going to be solved, and when we do, what will happen is taxes on the wealthy will go up. But according to the media, which said that Bush's tax cuts were only for the wealthy, taxes on other people will not go up until they see their paycheck, and then they'll find out they actually are going up, which means that the media all along was incorrect when it said that it would only help the rich people. And so now taxes on everybody are going up. The interesting thing is going to be what happens with the sequestration of $500 billion of military spending, which is I guess $50 billion a year, and then $500 billion of domestic. Chip, what happens? I understand the military spending part, that the Pentagon's going to have to figure out what to cut.
Right.
How's the other half work?
Well, I don't have the answer to that,
You don't?
Crom.
Okay.
And I just want to agree with you. I think we're going over this fiscal cliff. I think the president has worked hard to try and negotiate a plan, and the House Republicans refused to do that, to negotiate with him. John Boehner cannot get his.
What did he offer?
I think it was very clear. He said, we will raise everybody up to $250,000 a year. They'll be exempt, but those Bush tax cuts are going to go into effect for those above that.
What did he offer? Once again, you said he negotiated.
That was his plan, and the important thing is
his plan was to raise taxes on some and cut no spending.
He said, "Oh no! Number one, there were spending cuts, but number two, it's
What
important.
were
He
they?
ran. Wait, let me just finish this point. He ran on that. He ran on the fact that he was going to get rid of the Bush era tax cuts on the 1% or 2% of the American people, and he won re-election, and that's what he stood for.
Well, now it is true he won re-election, and the members of the Republican Party who won their House seats ran, every single one of them signing a tax pledge saying that they would not raise taxes on anybody. So the people who elected the Republicans don't want tax increases, and they hold a majority. And so
Just
we
in the
have
House,
to say,
but those people, many of those representatives, particularly Bob Corker is a good example, are backing away from the Norver.
well, Bob Corker's not in the House.
Well, in the Senate.
Well, I know, but the House is where the power is in the Republican Party, and Boehner could not even get the Republicans to agree
Right.
to raise taxes on people making over $1 million. And the reason for that, as Paul Ryan said very clearly, he said, President Obama has not offered a single dollar of spending cuts. In fact, when Boehner said, what do I get for raising taxes $800 million, Obama's response was, nothing. I get that much for free. Now, so when you say that the president has negotiated, once again, I ask, what has he agreed to give up that he didn't want to give up?
Well, that was going to be a part of the negotiation, and he drew the line at 250, although he raised it in his discussions with John Boehner to 450,000, and so he gave on that, and then there was no other discussion. And there has to be, he was elected with the understanding that there was going to be that tax increase on the super wealthy.
Gentlemen, help me out here. We talk about the 1% to 2%. Where does that start? At what annual income does that start? You tell me anybody who makes more than $250,000 is in the top 2%.
Well, that's what he said. That's what the president said. That was the.
But is that the case?
Well, actually, I'm not an expert on that. Crom, what do you think?
Well,
where is that
the
line?
interesting question is, what is $250,000? Because if you're a small business,
yes,
Right.
and you are showing taxable income of $250,000, that doesn't mean you have $250,000 of cash. You might have invested in equipment. You might be depreciating equipment. You might be on the accrual method, so you actually don't have the cash. What you might have is $150,000 in cash, but you're taxed at a $250,000 level, which means you're going to go broke if they don't change the tax code as it relates to small business.
Well, that was the other piece of this discussion too. There are all sorts of tax breaks they were trying to get rid of and talk about, and that never really went anywhere in these discussions the last 6 to 8 weeks, which is another problem. And I think Republicans and Democrats both agree that the tax code needs significant reform, and that didn't take place in this discussion.
I haven't seen that. I'm hoping that Harry Reid, I laughingly said they haven't passed a budget in the Senate in 3 years, and they haven't. By the way, the Republicans in the House have done it since Boehner has been Speaker. Pelosi did not for the 2 years she was there. They didn't pass a budget there. Boehner has, Reid has not, and so I'm still looking for some leadership from the president on tax reform, because so far all I know that President Obama wants is taxes to go up on the so-called wealthy.
Right, and he's going to either get that or we're going over the fiscal cliff.
And then when we do, then what will happen in your opinion? Let's say we go over the cliff.
Right.
Then what happens?
Well, I don't have that crystal ball, Crom.
I don't. Well, what would you guess?
Well, I think, one, we will see the taxes go up on the super wealthy. Which
No, they go up on everybody.
Yeah, but
they will go up on everybody. When we go over the cliff, They go up on everybody.
That's true.
Then what happens?
But it's a disproportionate increase on those who are the wealthy, and that will come into the economy. So that's going to be different. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. We'll see.
I think it'll be very interesting politically, because it's not conceivable to me that this is not what Obama actually wants to happen.
Well, I mean, when Mitch McConnell stood as the Senate Minority Leader for the last 4 years and said their single number one job was to get rid of President Barack Obama, that's all he cared about for the last 4 years. He failed at doing that. The president's made it very clear what his line in the sand was. We were going to see those tax rates go up on the super wealthy, and there's been no willingness to agree to that. And he actually increased it to was it 450 or 400,000?
I don't know, because it was never in writing.
Well, it
And
was
the things
discussed. It was discussed.
A lot of things have been discussed with this president that didn't turn out.
Gentlemen, at what point do the Democrats and the Republicans quit being Democrats and Republicans and become Americans? and do what is supposed to be best for the country.
Well, I'm glad to see,
even though you may not agree on how to get there.
Well, Bob Corker did that by saying that he was not going to stick by that the no tax pledge, and I commend Senator Corker for taking that stand. That is a courageous stand, and Grover Norquist is going to come after him, I'm sure, in some way. Hopefully, he's been minimized in that process because a lot of people have sort of thrown that pledge out. But I mean, that's what we need to see, and Senator Corker did that.
And Speaker Boehner offered to raise taxes on the wealthy if Obama would offer spending cuts. He hasn't offered a dollar. Now, talking about Americans, let's look at what the deficit is: $1.2 trillion. Spending is going through the roof. Entitlements are crazy, and Obama refuses to offer $1 in spending cuts, not one. And that's an amazing thing because it was the president himself who set up the Simpson-Bowles Commission that came back and said, you've got to reform entitlements, and he threw them out the window. And then when he was negotiating with Boehner, July a year ago over the deficit, he agreed to cut spending $1 trillion. And then it all fell apart. And now he offers nothing.
Well, let me disagree with you on one point, and this is going to be a little controversial, but Obamacare was not so much about giving 40 million Americans who don't have health insurance or access to health insurance. It was about the increasing cost in health expenditures in our country. And if we don't get that under control, and Obamacare was a mechanism to address the medical spending in our country. So that.
But it took 2,700 pages to do that?
Well, we can argue about that. It is an extremely complicated document and process. I mean, just look at the exchanges. Look at how difficult it is for the states across the country to determine whether they want to let the federal government run the exchanges or whether they're going to have state exchanges. I think Governor Haslam in Tennessee made a big mistake by not having a state exchange. We have the best medical minds in the country here in Middle Tennessee, those people who started HCA and all the other companies. I think we could come up with the whole idea behind the exchanges was to have innovative experiments of 50 different exchanges across the country to see which ones worked and which one didn't make sense,
right.
And then implement those. Now we're going to have sort of one size fits all with the federal government with the federal exchange, and I think we missed an opportunity here in Tennessee.
We talked last week though about the penalties.
Well, the reason that Governor Haslam turned it down is that under Obamacare, if you agree to set up a state exchange, here's what you agree to do. You agree to live under federal rules that are promulgated, federal rules that may be promulgated, or federal rules that may be changed. And so my good friend Chip says there's always going to be all this experimentation. No, there's not. There's one size fits all put down by the federal government telling the state exchanges how they will operate.
Well, you're assuming though, Crom, and this is what bothers me about your line of reasoning, is that the rules promulgated by the federal government are going to actually hurt the program. The federal government wants to see this Obamacare program work. It is in the interest of the Obama administration to have a successful implementation of this program so that we see costs reduced. Not only do we want to provide health care for the 40 million Americans that don't have it, but if we don't bring that line, if it continues, it's going to eat up everything we have in our economy. It has to come down.
Everything that Obamacare that was wrong with our health care system prior to Obamacare that was driving costs up, Obamacare has put them all on steroids. And the proof is in the pudding because since it passed 3 years ago, insurance rates have gone up an average of 12% a year.
That's because the insurance companies are trying to get their piece of the action now before they have to insure all the other Americans that come into the program. They're taking advantage of the system now. It's all going to equalize out.
All right, you get the last. The newcomer gets the last word in the first segment.
You've been
Don't
quiet,
know
Joe.
about the. Oh yeah, I'm enjoying the competition here. I'm trying not to get too involved. Remember, I'm the referee. You know, he's supposed to keep his mouth shut. He may do that, but maybe not for long. Tell you what, we're going to get our first break out of the way. We'll come back with Crom, Carmichael, and Chip Forrester. Get your scorecards out. We're going to want to know what round one went, how it went in your mind anyway. Stay with us. More coming up on Political Soup. Well, welcome back, everybody, to Political Soup. I'm Joe Wiiliams, sitting in the middle between Chip Forrester and Crom Carmichael. Now, I got to tell you, during the break, the doctors did come in. They have checked them both for concussions, and they tell us they're all good right now, that there are no additional head injuries other than what might have been there prior to coming in. I'm kidding, guys. One thing I think we left the first segment with, everybody's in the agreement, we're going off the fiscal cliff. And what that basically means is, come January 1, that's more money, as an average guy, that's more money out of my pocket that, quite honestly, I'm not sure I can lose, number one. But number two, It also means there's going to be less spending in some areas. How in the world does that, we went through the idea of the great influx of money. Let's spend money when President Obama first got there, the American
Stimulus
Reinvestment Act, the Stimulus Act. Now we're going to spend less money. That was supposed to kickstart an economy.
Well, the president has said it, that we had hoped not to go over the fiscal cliff so that the economy, which is slowly sort of easing back and moving in a positive direction, doesn't reverse. And we could well see some negative consequences of going over that fiscal cliff.
See, Chip and I agree. Higher taxes will put us back into a recession.
Well,
Let's hope it's not as bad as it was when the president took over, or the recession that the country was going into.
You hope it's not as bad, but you're saying that's what you expect. I mean, let's face it, this year, the Christmas season just completed.
Right.
Retailers are very concerned because December was extremely weak. How much of that is folks saying, you guys have convinced me, we're going over the cliff, I'm going to start playing my cards a little closer to my vest.
I did not see either Thelma or Louise in the shopping malls this year. Not one. They were preparing. Now, here's what's interesting. We've had 3 really nice growth periods in this country in the last 50 years. JFK cut taxes in 1961. The economy grew in the next 4 years by 25%. Unemployment rate when Johnson was reelected was 4.1%. Then he put in the Great Society programs, and we went through about 15 years of mess. Then Reagan became president. He cut taxes, and we had 7 or 8 years of growth. Then George Bush became president, the first one. He raised taxes. We go into a recession. President Clinton becomes president, and he cuts the capital gains tax rates from 28% to 20%, and we have a capital explosion. The economy is actually in balance because of the amount of revenue from capital gains taxes.
I'm glad to hear you giving Bill Clinton the credit he deserves. Thank you, Crom.
I
appreciate that. He deserves that.
He's been fair, yeah.
And I gave Jack Kennedy. If you'll notice, 2 of the 3 presidents that I'm giving credit to
And then what happened with George
Bush? Are Democrats because they cut taxes.
Right. And then what did George Bush do? He cut taxes, and what happened?
The economy did well for 3 years.
No, we went into the worst economic crisis the country's been in since the Great Depression.
Look at 2004, 2005, and 2006. I will grant you that we went into a terrible mess after that, but that wasn't because of the tax cuts. That's because of the housing debacle. But we can argue that one another time.
Okay.
But where we are on this one, where we are now is taxes are going up, spending is going down because of the sequestration.
Right.
And I think it's going to be very interesting politically as to whether or not the president will give on spending, on entitlements. Because Republicans have said, we will raise taxes on the wealthy. Every dollar that you will cut taxes, cut spending on entitlements.
Well, there have been discussions about entitlements. They've been talking about raising the Social Security age. I mean,
they've talked about it, and the president has not put a dollar of spending cuts on the table, not one.
Till he gets the commitment to either $250,000 or $400,000 as the line in the sand in terms of tax cuts for the wealthy.
When Boehner said, if I raise taxes $800 billion, what do I get for it? The president's answer was nothing. I get that for free. So all I'm saying, Chip, is with all due respect, when your guy puts up and makes me shut up, then that'll be a good sign. But at this point, he says, I want to spend every penny that I'm already spending, and I want you to raise the debt ceiling for the next 2 years. I want you to go ahead and raise it for the full amount of what I'll spend and give me more money to spend.
Well, he has to, and if we don't do that, and we're not good on our bonds, that's going to be a disaster for the economy. We all know that, and we're going to have to increase the debt ceiling. That's going to happen.
You realize that just this morning, apparently, Tim Geithner made the comment that we will reach our new debt ceiling
on Monday.
Yeah, by the end of the year. We can put some things off or
change the books here and there.
Yeah, in the private world we call it cooking the books.
Well, okay? Move it around to different accounts.
And we can put it off for a couple of days. But guys, I'm the average Joe here. I'm looking at this going, we're right back to July of last year with the debt limit, and we're about to go off a cliff because not only is the limit in trouble, now taxes are higher. I got to tell you, I'm not comfortable in the seat I'm sitting in.
Well, and apparently everybody, Republicans and Democrats, agree that just because we're going to raise taxes on everybody effective January 1st, it isn't going to solve the deficit.
Right.
That you've got to cut spending. I'm still waiting for your guy to put up.
Well, we'll see after we go over the fiscal cliff.
That's right.
I think the other point, that I want to make is that the president has worked hard to negotiate. Now, I know you're saying he's not, but he's laid out his plan. He ran for re-election on a certain plan, and it's going to be very bad for Republicans when we go over this fiscal cliff, and it's not going to help politically in the next election cycle. And I think that's a component of all of this. Letting us go over this cliff because Republicans will negotiate on what he wants to will be a negative consequence to them, which again.
Well, now let me ask you a question. You're the head of the Democrat Party here in Tennessee. Right. Let's assume we go over the cliff. Right now, Republicans have 7 seats in Tennessee and Democrats have 2. I'd be willing to predict that if we go over the cliff, that in 2014, Republicans will still have 7 after that election, and Democrats will have 2. Do you think it'll be any different than that here in Tennessee?
Well, I certainly think it'll be different in Tennessee with 1 seat. Congressman Scott Desjardins, who had sex with patients and gave them drugs, he's gone, and we're gonna win that one. That's a Democratic seat that we'll pick up. But I think all across the country, in marginal areas where we were close to picking up some House seats, we'll pick those up in 2014 when the American people sort of react to the fact that they feel Republicans pushed this country over the fiscal cliff.
Well, are you saying that Republicans won't run somebody in the primary, or that Desjardins might resign?
Well, they may well, but we'll have a great.
Didn't he win by a huge majority this time?
That's because
even with all the clouds.
Actually, it didn't come out until well into early vote. From a political perspective, we were halfway through early vote. More than 50% of the people in the 4th Congressional District had voted by the time all the negative came out, and the bulk of it, actually, the sex and the drugs with the patients and the pharmaceutical reps and all the other 8 affairs that he had didn't really happen until after the transcript was released.
I would say that he won't win his primary.
Well, he may.
And if you can't run against him, you can't win the seat.
Well, you can, sure. Oh, it's a marginal Republican district. It is not a strong Republican district.
He won 65-35.
Yeah, because.
I mean, 65-35. Come on now. I mean, this is kind of like the guy that ran against Corker.
Our candidate was underfunded, didn't have the resources from the very beginning to run a national congressional campaign.
I'm still going to bet it's 7-2.
All right, let me ask you this.
Getting in the weeds here.
Let me ask you this. If we go over the cliff, we find out things are going to be bad, and the economy starts to tank in the first 3 months, how long will it take to, one, fix this from a congressional and political standpoint? Secondly, how long before that fix has an effect on the economy?
Well, you're the expert on this, Crom. What do you think? How does that?
I think it'll be bad. I think raising taxes on everybody. The sequestration doesn't particularly trouble me, except I think taking $500 billion out of defense spending all at once is a bit of a problem. Right. But the other part of it doesn't trouble me at all. And I think at that point, the administration is going to have to figure out where to cut $500 billion of spending, which, by the way, that sounds like a lot. It's $50 billion a year out of $3 trillion. Right. So, I mean, we're talking 1.5% of the budget.
Yeah, we need to cut some zeros off there so everybody gets a better idea of what kind of numbers we're talking about.
Here's what's interesting. When Kennedy became president, the budget for the very first time went to $100 billion. When Kennedy became president, went to $100 billion. And now we're at $3.6 trillion. It's just a staggering amount.
It's a lot of money.
A lot of money.
The other half is we talk about the this compromise on the Bush-era tax cuts. Folks, let's not forget, even if heaven above opens up and there's a compromise on this and those are extended, whatever happens, there's still almost a 4% increase that we're all going to see, period, right?
That's true. Yeah, that's baked into the Obamacare.
So no matter what happens, my taxes are going up.
4%.
Yes.
That's probably not going to kill you, Joe.
Would you like to talk to my accountant?
4% changes people's behavior.
Sure it does.
And it's I agree with you, and it changes at a critical time when the economy is slowly. Our economy is like the Titanic, and to move it in a certain direction is a slow and complicated process. And I think you're right. It will affect people. People will amend their spending behavior, which could hurt the comeback.
Well, get the last word.
Well, we'll be able to watch here in Tennessee, because in California they've raised the state tax rate 4% on the wealthy. I'm betting that a lot of the wealthy people in California have thrown up their hands and said, I've had enough. I'm going to look for a state that doesn't tax me the way California does. I think that Tennessee will be the beneficiary of that. And if we can get rid of the hall tax in the next session, we'll really be the beneficiary of it. We will attract thousands.
Rich liberals from California?
Very wealthy conservatives.
You laugh.
The rich liberals are staying there.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, they'll stay there. They like the pain.
Oh, okay.
They like
my goodness.
We're going to welcome them to Tennessee.
We'll welcome all of them to Tennessee.
That opens up a door we are not going through. Tell you what. All right, both of them have had the last word on the first two segments. We'll roll the dice when we're gone and figure out what happens in our last one. When we come back, guns on everybody's mind, ours too. Stay with us on Political Soup. Well, welcome back, everybody, to the final segment of today's Political Soup. Joe Wiiliams, Crom Carmichael, Chip Forrester. Gentlemen, about a week ago, horrible, horrible situation in Newtown, Connecticut. 26, 27 people dead, 20 of them young children. It is not the first time from a journalistic standpoint I've had to report that there's been a gun in a school. This one, I think, more horrible because it was an elementary school and these kids really had no chance. One of the things that happens when gun violence occurs, be it in a school or a mass shooting at a mall or a shopping center or a theater, whatever, we start hearing more and more calls for more gun control. And I say more gun control because there are limitations and requirements in place now. Mm-hmm. Are we too lax? Is Piers Morgan right, or does he need to go back to England? Where are we? I mean, is there enough control there now? Do we need more? And how do we increase gun control without walking on the Second Amendment?
Well, I think it's very difficult to have gun control, especially on handguns, without trampling on the Second Amendment, because the Second Amendment's already ruled that people have the right to self-protection. But the question to me is not, because of this tragedy, is not the question of gun control. The question for me is, why did it happen? What can you do to stop it? And there are two issues for me that matter. One is mental health. Almost every time that you have one of these random shootings where you just have, a dozen people killed by somebody, the perpetrator is mentally ill, and we're not and we essentially let all the people who were being institutionalized because they were dangerous to themselves or dangerous to others, we let them out in the 60s, and we've been paying a price for it ever since. And so if you're not going to address mental illness, especially those people who are deemed to be dangerous to themselves or others, you can have all the gun control you want, you're still going to have these instances like this, because if you think about the law of large numbers, this happens, something terrible like this happens about once a year. You have 300 million people, you've got probably 1 million people who have some level of mental illness, and thousands of those are in fact dangerous. So I think you've got to address mental illness as the primary cause. The other one is, if you look at where these shootings are taking place, they are in gun-free zones. They just simply are. The post office, remember we had a few of those events where somebody said somebody's going postal. Post offices have security. Businesses had people who came in and shot employees. You don't have as much of that anymore because people don't know if it's a gun-free zone or not. But schools are gun-free, colleges are gun-free, malls are gun-free, theaters are gun-free, and in fact,
so are you arguing that they shouldn't be? Are you arguing that guns and
the guy in
schools,
Denver,
guns?
The guy in Denver that went to the theater
and
shot
that's
those
what
people.
You're arguing?
Yes,
you think we should have guns in schools, guns on college campuses, guns in churches?
He drove by 3 theaters to go to the one that had a sign that says no guns allowed in this theater. He drove by 3 that were closer to his home.
Well, let me just say make one comment. I agree with you 100%. And unless we address the mental health issue that sort of undergirds this whole problem, we're not going to be solving it. I also just want to say that in this discussion, I mean that there's a community in our country that's going through a very tough time, and sort of send prayers and support to the people of Newtown for what they've gone through. I do think, though, that this thing has provoked a discussion in our country to make us look at some of the specific ramifications of the kind of weapons and ammunition that people have access to, the 30 clip ammunition thing that they're talking about. So that's good, and that discussion needs to take place. I do want to just also say that as a Democrat, I mean, and a Tennessee Democrat, we uphold the Second Amendment rights of people to bear arms, but there are all sorts of circumstances around which we can have the discussion, and I think we're seeing that happen with what just went on.
Yeah, we're certainly having a discussion about it. What we're talking about here is how do you address it in a way that actually solves the problem. Now, for example, we have laws against drugs in this country. We have laws against cocaine. Cocaine is anywhere you want to get it, and so just having a law against it doesn't mean you won't have it. We actually had prohibition, where we went through the process of having a constitutional amendment to say that nobody could have alcohol. And there were speakeasies all over the place, and criminals ran those joints. And so now what
So are you
have
advocating
is,
the NRA's position? Let's have an armed guard in every school. Is that what you're talking about?
well,
Frank?
I would exchange one school bureaucrat for a school security officer in every school that I could think of. I would rather have one less bureaucrat and one more armed security guard in schools.
So you're supporting the NRA's position
than the current situation. I don't know exactly what theirs is.
Well, they
So
said they
this is
wanted
my
we should have
position.
an armed
Well, then
officer
they-
in every
Did
school.
Did not President Bill Clinton say the same thing?
I don't know. Did he?
Yes, he did.
I'm not.
At one point, he called for
So the
SRO in
NRA
every school.
So the NRA is supporting Bill Clinton's position.
I'm not
From years ago.
From
I'm not
years
aware.
ago.
I will say that position has created a reaction in our country it's really hurt the NRA and the credibility of the NRA. Let me just tell you, there are a few.
Why? What's wrong with trading one school bureaucrat for a security guard?
Because it's not going to solve the problem, Crom, and you know that. And the other, what you want to look at is the assault rifles that these people have access to, the kind of ammunition that they have access to, the clips that will. I mean, had the guy not had a 30 clip rifle, he wouldn't have not been able to do anywhere near the damage that took place.
Well, okay, Chip. I guess what I'm saying is that I'll compromise with you here. Let's put a security guard in and reduce the clips, so that you have a security guard when the guy comes in with a 6-shooter.
So you would agree to banning a certain kind of rifle and banning a certain kind of.
Sure, if you'll agree to a security guard in the schools.
How are we going to pay for that?
By getting rid of one bureaucrat in each school. Bingo. Trade one for the other.
Actually, it's not as simple as that.
It's for the kids. That's never. I mean, that's every politician I've ever known who needed to get a tax increase came out with, well, we're doing it for the kids.
Well,
okay, this is one time we really would be.
Well, actually, I'll add the piece of this too. You're talking about what Republicans want to cut entitlements and change the program, the mental health programs that we've cut back on because we've not funded them, and what has happened with these people. Would you be in favor of increasing that kind of spending at the federal and state level in our country?
Well, you'd have to get the Supreme Court to reverse its decision of back in the 60s where they said you cannot institutionalize
There are
somebody.
other mechanisms. The funding cuts have been draconian over the last 20 years.
They've been draconian because the Supreme Court said you can't hold people.
But the services and the kind of help that these people get, the schizophrenics need, they're not getting in the system that we have today, Crom. That's
if you
one of the
don't
problems.
institutionalize dangerous people, Chip, you're not solving the problem.
Well, it's not all about institutionalizing. It's also about providing the kind of medication that they need, not throwing them back out the insurance companies and Medicare.
If you'll institutionalize them, but if you're going to say that, if you're going to do
that
what
is not the single answer to it, Crom.
No, but it's the most important part of handling the mentally ill who are in fact dangerous to society. You can't just say, we'll medicate them and let them run around and go do whatever they want to. Because when you do, it'll be that random person once a year who gets a bunch of guns and goes and kills 15 to 20 people.
The interesting thing about the debate that's taken place over the last week from all the psychiatrists and those in the country have been about the mental health care that these people aren't getting, and that's really, I mean, you really hit the nail on the head when you started this conversation, and that's really the fundamental problem, and we're not providing that care, and we've cut that care back over the last 20 years, and we're seeing the consequence of that. That could actually maybe be even more important than gun control.
Well, let me draw this then back to where we started the whole show today. Hey, we agree. These folks need to we all agree on the mental health care aspect of this thing.
So Chip and I have agreed we're going to get rid of one bureaucrat in every
well,
school and fund mental health.
You say that number one. I don't like that terminology of bureaucrat too. These are people.
Wait a minute.
They are bureaucrats.
They're not.
Well, they are bureaucrats. That's what they
Gentlemen.
are. I'm not
Gentlemen.
talking about
People
I'm not talking
providing
about the teachers.
care.
Gentlemen,
I'm talking about the
Gentlemen,
bureaucrats.
gentlemen, my question, we all agree they need mental health. How do we pay for that when we're headed off the physical cliff?
Well, if John Boehner and Mitch McConnell would just agree to the president's plan, then we'd be fine.
Oh boy, now there's a simpleton answer.
Well,
What a sales job.
well,
Good job.
You have to reform entitlements. You have to reform entitlements.
And the president has not taken that off the table, Crom. You want to see...
He just won't put it on the table.
No, yes. You want to see specific things. He's put, over the course of discussions in the last couple of years, he's put some ideas on the table.
Okay.
But he's drawn the line in the sand. Unless we see taxes go up on the top 2% in our country, he's not going to talk about anything else. And the Republicans have fought that tooth and nail, sending us over the fiscal cliff.
The Republicans have said dollar spending cuts, dollar tax increase on people making over whatever number you want to pick.
250 or
And
400,000,
whatever you want to pick, but dollar for dollar. That's what Republicans have said. And where we are now is this. The president has said we will not increase the age of retirement by a day. We will not increase the age of eligibility for Medicare by a day. We will not means test Social Security. We will not means test Medicare. Now, if he's not going to, and then he's also said on Medicaid, if a state expands it by one person, it has to expand it all the way up to 130%. So for Obama, his message is my way or the highway, period, on everything, Chip. That's where he is. We're going to go over the cliff, and then we'll have to see how the politics
work out.
Well, what about one nice, and we talked about this last week, how about one nice clean bill on the one thing everybody seems to be agreeing on, and that is 250, 400, pick your number. Anybody under that? And I am so far under that that I like that idea. Go ahead
and exempt them.
And exempt it. Get them out and get them satisfied, then go argue the rest.
Well, you haven't solved anything, but
You've made me happy.
You made you happy, you made the president happy, and you haven't solved anything. And then we can come back here and actually talk about what needs to be done, because the president will have gotten the one thing he says will solve everything.
Well,
that's good. So then we'll have a discussion.
Yeah.
And you'll be happy.
And if that were to happen, and things turn rotten, would you agree that Obama's turned out to be wrong?
Possibly.
Right there. That's it. Folks, I'm getting the last word on this one. Thank you so much for joining us this week on Political Soup. Can you imagine what the future holds? For Chip Forrester and Crom Carmichael, I'm Joe Wiiliams. Thank you so much. Join us next time on Political Soup.